All right, we have more changes unfolding in the U.S. power grid. Changes that have a second urgent warning being delivered by another investment firm. First, we saw JP Morgan warn about this in their list of 2024 predictions, saying blackouts would hit major U.S. cities and population centers this year, 2024, due to inadequate infrastructure and waning power generation. Well, now we have a second warning, this time from Eric Peters, River Assets Management's founder and CIO. This is also the guy, by the way, who runs Coinbase Asset Management. And he breaks down with more detail than JP Morgan did as to why he believes this is all of a sudden a thing. And he points the finger at a new technology that is sucking more energy than most people realize. And spoiler, it's not crypto. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps me out. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do that so you continue to get these regular updates. Also, check out our new daily show over at the NotifyAmerica YouTube channel. The link is in the description. When most Americans think power outages, they think California, rolling blackouts, the state shutting down power in scheduled allotments to conserve energy, something that most of the country has never experienced or had to deal with. Yet, according to banking giant JP Morgan, this is going to change. In a list that one of their top strategists released for the new year, a top 10 shock, surprise, and predictions list, they predicted that due to retirement of dispatchable power generation such as nuclear, coal, and gas, and underinvestment in pipelines, gas storage, and winterization, that major U.S. cities will face electricity outages and/or natural gas outages, which they say are much worse. Yet with all those dire warnings, the average American experienced just 8 hours of power outages in 2020. But that number has been rising. In fact, it more than doubled over the last 5 years, and these blackouts have cost the U.S. an estimated $150 billion per year. We don't currently have the infrastructure to produce and deliver this much power. The stakes are too high, perhaps even existential. In the next 5 years, we're going to see brownouts in major U.S. cities. That's the magnitude of what's unfolding. That's a quote from Eric Peters' new note. He's the founder of One River Asset Management, and he's warning about the power drain that's already beginning to hit the United States and other parts of the world, all due to what he says is AI, artificial intelligence, saying the incremental demand for electricity in the U.S. to power AI chips will be somewhere between 35 and 45 gigawatts in the coming 5 years. A large coal plant produces roughly 1 gigawatt. A nuclear plant is closer to 2 gigawatts, but the amount of energy required to power these AI chips will be up to 45 gigawatts. We don't currently have the infrastructure to produce and deliver this much power. But the competition for electricity isn't going to slow. It's now an unstoppable race. The stakes are just too high, perhaps even existential. That's what he says. And he goes on to explain that there's going to be these 8 LLMs, large language models, which is the technology behind artificial intelligence. Think of it like a database, right, that it uses to grow its base of knowledge. All the available databases and different sources of information that they feed into the AI so it can learn. Well, what he's warning about is that there will be 8 massive LLMs, large language models, developed in the U.S. alone between Microsoft's OpenAI, Google, Facebook, Elon's Grok, however you pronounce it, Amazon, and Oracle. Each of them already have one.
Google unveiling long-awaited new details around its large language model, Gemini, this morning, ramping up the race against rivals like Microsoft and OpenAI. Deirdre Bosa has the story for today's Tech Check. Hi, Dee.
Hi, good morning. So Google's latest bid to prove that it can keep up and lead the AI arms race, that is Gemini. It's the next version of its large language model, and really it's the answer to OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Now, on top of the corporate AI arms race that's happening, there's then the U.S. government, who will likely have 1 or 2 of their own, one for the military and one for the intel community, and that's just in the U.S. You also have other countries doing the exact same thing, like China.
There's a pride and patriotic purpose to this work. We believe that AI is bound to provide a lot of support for the development of industrial intelligence. When Baidu and Chinese enterprises develop AI technology, we follow our president's command, setting our sights on health and safety of the people and major scientific needs of the country.
Eric Peters warns that the U.S. will begin to see these brownouts throughout the country, saying the competition for electricity isn't going to slow. It's now an unstoppable race, and the stakes are too high, perhaps even existential. In the next 5 years, we're going to start seeing brownouts in major U.S. cities. That's the magnitude of what's unfolding. Now, that's just the AI side of the coin. The larger, more dire issue is raw power generation, citing peak loads rising at an alarming rate due to electrification coinciding with increasingly intermittent new sources of power such as wind and solar, not to mention 80 to 110 gigawatts of nuclear and fossil fuel generation that goes offline, goes into retirement by 2033. That's what JP Morgan wrote in that note from January 1st, that makes up around 7% of all currently installed capacity, writing the areas of the country that will be most impacted are the Midwest states, which stretches from Minnesota down to Louisiana. But the outage risks in more extreme weather conditions, the NERC cited for New York, New England, and the entire western U.S. But those are just traditional power outages. What about natural gas outages? Well, apparently those are going to be far worse because during a gas outage, the local gas companies need to go around building by building, manually shutting off the valves. They do this to prevent residual gas from leaking through units with extinguished pilot lights. I don't know if you saw those recent news stories about those home explosions, awful stories. Many of them were blamed on natural gas leaks.
A house in Hopkins exploded. It destroyed the home and killed the elderly couple who lived there.
And tonight, fire officials are releasing the cause of that fire. Rob Olson joining us live from Hopkins. And so, Rob, this is just a tragic story all the way around.
Yeah, and the Hopkins Fire Department today saying that they have ruled this is accidental. Now, while there were questions about the recently replaced water heater, they did find that that was not the cause. The gas line to the heater was not the cause, but there was a gas line connected to its replacement that in the end, this was a tragic but simple error.
And look, after researching all of this, what goes into natural gas outages, I'm kind of freaked out, to be honest. The restoration process alone after an outage, it's like ridiculously tedious and long. It involves purging the main distribution system, followed by a careful inspection at each point of service to ensure that the gas lines are safe and operational before restoring service and reigniting the pilot light, something that I sure as hell wouldn't want to do. JP Morgan says this: even losing service to 130,000 customers would be considered a major outage and could have taken 5 to 7 weeks to restore. A large outage could also cause extensive property damage due to burst water pipes within homes and buildings, since water expands when it freezes. Up to 7 weeks to fully restore a natural gas outage. That's a long freaking time. So all this talk about power outages, major warnings now from multiple investment firms, and JP Morgan, whatever you think about them, they're still paid a whole ton of money to predict these types of things. They have all sorts of open source databases, proprietary databases that they pull information from, not to mention hundreds, maybe thousands of analysts that comb over all this data and systems to put together all their different trading strategies, etc. So whether you want to believe them or not, it's still something noteworthy to pay attention to. But what's even worse, what's even more ridiculous, is the push that we've been seeing over the last few years for ESG, environmental social governance. Companies like BlackRock have been pushing the ESG agenda on corporate America without realizing the negative blowback, the consequences that it can have, trying to penalize states and organizations who rely on certain types of energy to power their plants, etc. Well, it seems we're clearly not ready for 100% alternative energy like wind and solar, not to mention the majority of those wind and solar panels and equipment is manufactured where? In China. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.